What fan theories have blown your mind with their devastating logic? Story 1. I've said it before on Reddit, but the one about Darth Sidious stealing Padme's life force to keep a fatally injured Vader alive at the end of Revenge of the Sith. Basically, Padme doesn't die of a broken heart, but rather Palpatine used his mastery of the dark side, which he learned from his master, Darth Plagueis, to sap her life force and transfer it to his new apprentice Vader after his defeat on Mustafar. The opera scene in Episode 3 tells how Plagueis taught his apprentice everything he knew and that he has discovered how to create life. With that knowledge, Palpatine was able to save Vader from otherwise lethal wounds. Story 2. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, there's the story of the three brothers. During Harry's time, they are represented by Lord Voldemort, the brother with the Elder Wand and who dies, Snape, the brother with the Resurrection Stone, who also dies, and Harry himself, the brother with the invisibility cloak that hid from death itself and survives. Albus Dumbledore represents death. He gives Harry the invisibility cloak, then the resurrection stone, and he ultimately has the Elder Wand, too. He also briefly greets Harry in the afterlife. J.K. Rowling liked this theory enough to approve it, in fact. Story 3. Jurassic Park never had any dinosaurs, just genetically modified creatures designed to resemble them. The flea circus scene in the book and movie, the dwarf pygmy elephant scene in the book, the admission that most sources of dino DNA are too degraded in the book and movie, there's a lot of hints that Hammond is continuing his huckster style. The main plot has them visiting the island for a safety check. But what do a paleontologist and paleobotanist know about safety checks? If Hammond can fool them, he can fool anyone. Not to mention the real-world problems with using preserved mosquitoes as a DNA source and the changing nature of dinosaur knowledge. No feathers, when we now think they did have them. Nice try to retcon Jurassic World, I ain't buying it. Edit. That is, the dinosaurs we see in Jurassic Park have virtually no actual dinosaur DNA, but were heavily genetically modified versions of other base creatures that we do have DNA access to, Hammond admits twice in the novel, to tricking people into seeing what they want to see. In one's case, where a mechanized circus with no fleas has children claiming to see the fleas, and in another where a natural pygmy elephant with dwarfism was used to demonstrate the powers of genetic engineering, by heavily implying it was itself the result of genetic engineering. The dinosaurs in Jurassic Park were the ultimate extension of this. Animals with no actual dinosaur DNA, but engineered to fool people into believing they are actual dinosaurs. Story 4. Ditto is the first attempt to recreate Mew. Ditto is the same color and weight as Mew. It is also the only other Pokemon, in the original 150, that can use any move in the game. Mewtwo is the second attempt to recreate Mew, but Mewtwo went berserk and destroyed the lab. Clarification edit, Mewtwo being created and destroying the lab is canon, but the theory part is that he is the second attempt with Ditto being the first attempt. There is another theory saying that every Ditto, since when Ditto breeds the egg never hatched a Ditto, was a failed attempt, so Mewtwo was probably the millionth attempt. Story 5. I also made a fan theory about Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. Toodles are a time machine. Toddler lives a day with Mickey and the gang, finds out what type of problems they encounter, then travels back in time to find the type of tools that would help them and relives the same day. That's why toddlers always have the perfect mouse-tool to solve the problem. Toodles also has the secret mouse-tool, which is Toodles' way of solving a new problem that may arise as a result of the butterfly effect. Story 6. My personal favorite is the one where Bruce Wayne gets sent back in time and ends up killing his own parents. He then has a mental breakdown and ends up becoming the Joker. CNP, it's a couple years from now, the chips are on the line, the multiverse is at stake again, only this time it all comes down to Batman. He defeats the ultimate evil of the DC universe, only to find himself launched through time into a strangely familiar city. Scrambling to find some clothes after his costume got destroyed by Z-rays in the epic final battle, he nabs some threads off a low-hanging clothesline. He leaves his bat wallet full of cash on the windowsill. He's not a bad guy, after all. Just then, he sees a family of three emerge from the alley nearby. With a strange sense of déjà vu, Bruce recognizes his mother and father and his childhood self. This is the night Bruce's parents were murdered. Bruce whirls around, looking for the culprit, Joe Chill. But the only people there are himself and the Waynes. They barely glance at the ragged figure as they start to walk past. With a spike of cold horror, Bruce realizes that in its final death throes, the ultimate evil he had faced in the future sent him backwards through time for a very specific reason. Color draining from his face, Bruce reaches a hand into the borrowed coat's pocket to find a dense metallic lump. Drawing it out of the pocket, he comes face to face with a snub-nosed revolver. A flash of terrible insight comes to Bruce, along with an iron certainty. Without Batman, the universe would never survive the ultimate evil. Without this knight, there is no Batman. This is his only chance. He must choose, break his one rule to never kill, or be complicit in the assured annihilation of the universe. There is no real choice. With tears streaming down his face, he remembers with trained photographic memory the hollow words the mugger spat at the elder Waynes. They turn, startled. As if his hands had minds of their own, he feels the pressure on his fingers as he slowly and inexorably pulls the trigger. Bruce Wayne has ended his parents in order to save everything else. Story 7. Bender from Futurama wasn't a criminal until he met Fry. When we first meet Bender, he's ready to end it because he found out he was helping to make passing booths. This doesn't tally with the Bender that we get to know throughout the course of the series. In fact, nothing he says before they run from Leela in the first series suggests that he's nearly as bad as the Bender we love. When they try to escape from Leela in the Head Museum, Bender gets shocked via an old light fitting. My theory is thus. In doing so, it caused Bender to reboot. In the Penguin episode, we see that Bender resets into a mode relevant to his surroundings. He sees penguins. He boots into penguin mode. Therefore, since he rebooted in the Hall of Criminals, the first thing he sees is the heads of famous criminals, and therefore reboots into the lovable but highly illegal Rogue. Story 8. The Dursleys were so cruel to Harry because they were under the influence of the Horcrux in his head. We've seen that even short exposure to the Locket Horcrux messed with your head, so why couldn't the piece of Voldemort's soul in Harry be affecting the way the Dursleys perceived him? Especially since they were exposed to it over the course of years. This can also be used to explain why the entire school and wizarding world turned their back on their hero several times, heir of Slytherin and Voldemort isn't back, Malarkeys, and why Ron was so quick to abandon him in Goblet of Fire. And basically any other time, anyone is unnecessarily mean to Harry. The Horcrux did it. Story 9. Surprised I have not seen the one about the Flintstones and the Jetsons actually taking place at the same time. Due to war, the surface of Earth was decimated back to the Stone Age. So the Jetsons, and all the people they know, live high up in the sky where things are clean and new, whereas the Flintstones live on the surface where everything is made of the remnants of society. It also explains why the Flintstones have technology that seems to be out of place, like record players and cars. Story 10. Signs. There are no aliens invading because they would just use tech and win from space. The kid is an idiot. There are demons, though. Even if alien invaders handicap themselves, they could still bash a door to pieces with a rock. However, demons have to work by esoteric rules similar to vampires. A closed door has power against demons. It is possible to trap a demon in a pantry. Also, water's not acid, and if it was, they would not invade Earth. Holy water, on the other hand, has similar effects on demons. I actually feel like people miss the point of the movie. Some of this ties into the demons theory, I suppose. The movie is called Signs, not Crop Circles. The crop circles have nothing to do with the title of the movie. Mel Gibson is a former priest who has lost his faith because of the senseless and random way his wife died a few years prior. Various occurrences happen in the movie that seemed illogical at those times that makes it so that his son survives the attack at the end, almost like a miracle. These occurrences are the signs for Mel Gibson to take up his faith again by the end of the movie. Because theism logic. Story 11. Pretty much everything to do with any Dark Souls game. When I first played the game, I thought it was designed to be just throwaway hardness with no plot. I fell down the internet rabbit hole after that and never looked back. For the uninitiated, the world is rather deeply constructed, but they tell you very little through dialogue or spoon feeding. Almost all of the lore is gleaned through item and gear descriptions. Once you start putting the pieces together, you start noticing placements in the environment that you wouldn't think twice about, that are actually lore, like a corpse in a certain place. holding a certain item. It's all very subtle and fascinating, and it's basically 100% fan theories. Story 12, that Guardians of the Galaxy is actually a role playing game that the Avengers are playing. Bucky is the DM and has to deal with Steve actively messing with Bucky about his totally messed up character, a genetically engineered raccoon with a gun fetish. Natasha and the massive backstory she's come up with about her female assassin and daughter of a god. Tony Stark's self deprecating and smug demi human team leader. Thor, who is having trouble understanding the game, just has a big tough character who only understands the basics like loyalty and doesn't get the subtle jokes everyone else is making. And Bruce, who is too busy to really pay attention, has a powerful character who does whatever Steve tells him to do, and all he says is, I am Groot. Story 13. Aladdin is set in the distant future after some kind of apocalypse. The genie and the flying carpet aren't magic, just highly advanced technology from a bygone age. Explains all the historical inaccuracies, and the genie doing impressions and references to things from the 20th century. My personal theory is that the genie doesn't experience time in a linear fashion. The movie does take place whenever it takes place, in a fictional place, at an unspecified time, so historical inaccuracies I think can't logically exist. But the genie hasn't been in that cave since 10,400 BC or whatever. The Cave of Wonders is a magical place that doesn't experience time in a regular manner. And the genie's been in there 10,000 years or so. Maybe he was exaggerating. But his last master lived in the early 1990s AD. That's why he references so much stuff from the 80s and early 90s, and some stuff from before that, but doesn't reference anything from after the early 90s, which he would if it were really the future. I know obviously the filmmakers couldn't reference things that didn't exist yet, though. His last master lived in the early 90s, used up his 3 wishes, Genie went back into the cave, and because again, neither he nor the cave experienced time in a linear fashion, spent 10,000 years or so there until Aladdin got a hold of the lamp. Essentially, the lamp is like the genie's TARDIS, only he can't travel through space in it and can't choose what time to go to or leave. Also, I kept accidentally typing lame instead of lamp, and the Dave of Wonders. Story 14. The Demogorgon was created by Eleven and is an external upside-down manifestation of herself, based on her fear and horror. Edit. The theory doesn't require her to have manifested the entire upside down. She could have just parked the Demogorgon there. Note the correct spelling is with a O, as that ambiguous second vowel. Source, a childhood spent dungeon crawling. With all the ash and the sickness of people upside down, it seemed really clear to me that it was an alternate reality where the Cold War escalated to nuclear devastation. The Demogorgon is a creature that was mutated by radiation or part of a species that evolved to exist in that reality. It has no eyes because of the lack of light in its environment. Story 15. I'm super late and no one will ever see this, but Jean Valjean of Les Miserables is a half-carrier of myostatin-related muscle hypertrophy on his father's side. If he was a full carrier of the gene, he would look so absolutely ripped everyone would be commenting on it. But if he was just a half carrier of the gene, he would have enormous strength without needing to work out. It explains how his father and brother died so early. Carriers of the gene often have heart problems. It explains how he gained mass on a prison diet, was constantly strong enough to scale walls, even when malnourished and in his 60s. It explains how he never worked out and yet could fight off a literal bear in the books and raise a cart that was at minimum 500 pounds in the book and musical. It also explains his eventual cause of death, heart failure brought on by starvation. Story 16. I've made up a theory about sword art online. When Kirito dies in the fight with Heathcliff or whatever, he doesn't just come back because of goddamn determination. If that was the case, I'm sure it wouldn't have taken 2 years before someone during and after their death thought, I really don't want to die, and just comes back to life. No, no, no. Kirito comes back to life because Klein uses the goddamn resurrection stone on him. Klein may or may not have seen someone die in the time between Kirito giving him the stone and Kirito's death, but in either case, he still had the stone. He kept it all that time. Kirito died and Klein brought him back. After defeating Heathcliff then, he goes to the same place Asuna did as she died. This place probably serves 2 purposes. The first would be that everyone who dies goes there in the end to see the world they had been living in, like a final look before they move on. The second is that the player who defeats the final boss goes there too. They get the watch from afar as the world they were trapped in crumbles and disappears. So, with Asuna still being in the sequence and area before a player's true death, Kirito dies, comes back, and defeats Heathcliff, successfully finishing the game. This all happens before Asuna truly dies, thus, whether intentional or as a glitch or unconsidered circumstance within the game, she gets to leave the game as well, and both she and Kirito get to continue loving each other and living happily. But we all know Klein is the true hero of SO. Story 17, in the movie The Secret of NIMH. When Brisby goes to Mr. Aegis's lab for medicine, he is working on some sort of chemical concoction. If you look closely, you will also notice several open human-sized books that he is studying. And if you look even closer, you will see that they are research journals from NIMH. You will notice that there are many animals in the field that exhibit intelligence, dress in clothes, and basically behave the same as the NIMH rats, with the great owl specifically owing a favor to Mr. Brisby. This leads one to question not only why that is, but what exactly it is that Mr. Aegis is working on. And I think the most likely answer would be that they were trying to duplicate NIMH's research that made them all intelligent, and that they had been running tests on the local fauna with some success. This would explain why some animals show themselves as having intellect, while others do not. It also makes the fears of the NIMH agents highly justified. Story 18. I love the Smash Bros. Theory that each iteration of the game represents Masahiro Sakurai's journey as the director and creator of the series. It starts out playful in the first game, and the characters are all represented by toys that are being brought to life by the imagination of a young Sakurai. The stress begins to get to him in Melee, which is why Crazy Hand is introduced. Since Master Hand's inclination is to create, Crazy Hand's inclination is to destroy. And Sakurai wants to, in essence, destroy with one hand what he created with the other, since the development of these games is so taxing. In Brawl, he begins to feel societal pressures towards his creations. In the story mode, Master Hand is revealed to be a puppet of an entity named Taboo, who represents taboos in society, attempting to dictate his career choices. And in the fourth game, the vicious Master Core battle is representative of Sakurai pouring his all into a final iteration of the series and then submitting to the player. It's an intricate theory, but the game theorists do a great job explaining it in their video on it. You can watch it here. Story 19. The Gravity Falls Stanley Pines Twin Theory. Basically, the show has a character named Stanford, who lived in a tourist trap in the woods. Certain details from flashbacks, a mysterious pair of glasses in a hidden room, and the fact that Stanford's car's license plate was STNLY led fans to believe that he had a secret twin named Stanley who lived in that house for some time. After it was revealed that there was a portal under the house, fans theorized that Stanley had gotten sucked through the portal and that he was the author of the mysterious journals. Fans were getting so close to the truth that the show's creator leaked a fake image of another character writing the journals. In the end, the whole theory was right, except that the Stanford we knew was actually Stanley, who took on his brother's identity after he disappeared through the portal. Story 20. In Plato's dialogues, the character Socrates is just that, a character. He did not really exist. Plato made him up in order to perpetuate his own dangerous ideas under the guise of attributing them to this amalgamation of the orating philosophers that he caricatured and named Socrates. Look what happens to Socrates within the narrative. He is tried by his city and forced to end it for doing exactly what Plato was doing, spreading ideas that were dangerous to the state and corrupting the youth. So Plato wisely distanced himself from these ideas in order to avoid a similar fate. Story 21. Rose Bolton is immortal. According to the books of A Song of Ice and Fire, House Bolton has only ever had one lord, and the age of Roose is never actually specified, although some fans think it's about 45. This theory was made based on the absence of other Bolton lords apart from Roose, of their tendency of flaying their enemies, and of the Faceless Men. The theory says Roose is actually an immortal man who moves from face to face and is planning on using Ramsay as a new body. Story 22. Friends read an explanation of this on Reddit maybe a couple of years ago, thought was a really good idea, maybe a little sad, but really good idea, seem to remember it as Phoebe looking through the window of coffee shop, Central Perk, and imagining she was part of the group or similar. Anyway, I haven't watched Friends for years and have no real desire to watch it again, but full credit to whoever came up with this idea. And I apologize for maybe butchering what was a great explanation that was originally written by half remembering it and it all being a little fuzzy in my mind. In summary, Phoebe imagined everything that happened, and she was homeless or similar. Story 23, anything that isn't insert character here, is insane. A good fan theory gives you a new way of looking at something, while making the main character insane rarely does so, and the evidence is usually just eliminating the suspension of disbelief. For example, the evidence for the events of Harry Potter being all in Harry's head is that magic doesn't actually exist. Beyond that, the insanity theory often serves to invalidate the story rather than putting it in a new light. The fan theory that Harry Potter, in coming back from death, gives up the ability to ever die and be with his loved ones, makes his victory essentially a tragic one. Harry Potter being insane doesn't really do anything like that. Story 24. Three have moved into my head and stayed. 1. Harry Potter. The Department of Muggles Affairs, or whatever it is called, purposefully keeps wizards thinking they are superior and keeps them infighting, while simultaneously keeping the vast majority of the world from knowing they exist. Because they realize that modern science plus magic plus military's will world go away. Muggle-born wizards of high intelligence and capability are eventually pulled into the fold since they know both worlds. This will likely happen to Hermione, if it hasn't already. 2. The Simpsons. Every member of the family is actually a genius, but only Lisa accepts and exhibits it openly. Marge gave up her personal goals to raise a family and keeps herself modest to not make Homer feel stupid. However, her intelligence and capability shines through from time to time, like when she tried being a cop. Homer literally is a genius, but is physically limited by the crayon in his brain, which he chooses to have put back in because he values joy over knowledge. Bart is a genius, but sees how his father is happy being dumb, while Lisa is miserable being smart. So he follows his mother's example, hiding his intelligence to pursue other goals. Lisa is the only one who embraces genius, and she is the most miserable. It makes the show into a discussion about happiness versus knowledge. 3. Pixar Universal Theory. Totally not typing this one up. It is ridiculously long and involved, but it is simply amazing. You owe it to yourself to look it up.